When George Orwell sat down to write his prophetic novel, 1984, never could he have imagined that the real 1984 would have been a showcase of some of the best films of the last 40 years. Films such as Purple Rain, The Terminator, Indiana Jones and the Temple of Doom, Gremlins, Splash, Amadeus, 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 Repo Man, Spinal Tap, A Nightmare on Elm Street, Once Upon a Time in America, and who could forget Ghostbusters! Hello again, I'm Terence McGuana. Did you miss me? Bet you didn't. In one of my previous videos I made a bold claim that Beverly Hills Cop is a cinematic masterpiece, and that statement I wholeheartedly stand by. Now, I'm sure you're all familiar with this one, but for the amnesiacs out there
and the aliens living among us,
let me break it down for you. Streetwise Detroit cop Axel Foley is on a one-man crusade through the landscape of Beverly Hills, Los Angeles to track down the killers of his childhood friend. On paper this film would seem very cookie cutter, with Axel Foley being a lone gunman wandering into a strange town to seek justice. The plot to me seemed very reminiscent of 1968's Coogan's Bluff, where it was a fish out of water story, kind of story that's been done a million times before and since. If you compare it to Burt Reynolds' films from the 1970s, stuff like Hooper, Gator, Smokey and the Bandit, the characters in those films, you don't necessarily get invested in them. Yeah, they've got terrific action scenes, they've got amazing comedic moments, but really, do you care about these characters? I would also argue outside 1988's Midnight Run that Beverly Hills Cop has never been matched or replicated as much as Hollywood has tried. On the surface, Beverly Hills Cop seems like a fine action comedy, but when you get right down to it, there are some deeper themes that run through this film. During the opening titles to this film, we're introduced to the city of Detroit, where we're shown how impoverished a lot of the people that reside there and how they seem to be mainly people of colour. This is set up in juxtaposition to what we experience later on when Axel Foley first arrives in Beverly Hills. The way that it's actually portrayed, the difference between Detroit and Beverly Hills is almost like a different planet. It's almost like a danceable version of the Stargate sequence from 2001, I would argue. But what makes this so interesting is not just the juxtaposition of these two cities, but how Axel Foley manages to manoeuvre through both of them. It's really interesting the way that the director has chosen to portray the police department in Detroit. It looks more like a police station from an episode of Kojak, something we're really familiar with. These guys are working class cops, you know, and they make a point of showing that a lot of the extras who are playing cops in the background are diverse. There are a lot of people of colour in this police force, whereas when you go to Beverly Hills and you meet Lieutenant Bogomil, Sergeant Taggart and Billy Rosewood, there are very few people of colour in the background, especially in the earlier scenes when we meet the Beverly Hills cops for the very first time. The director seems to have blocked out people of colour for a good reason. I feel it's there to give us the impression that particularly Sergeant Taggart is a racist. What I think is the core value of this film is Axel Foley himself. Here is a man who is already integrated. I would imagine there are a lot of sort of black film scholars out there who would criticise this film because it's about a black man avenging the life of his white buddy, which kind of harks back to The Defiant Ones, where Sidney Poitier risks his life to save Tony Curtis. So it's almost like, you know, the black man will walk over fire to save the white man, but when the door swings the other way, yeah, forget about it. We learn early on that in Axel Foley's youth that he was a bit of a car thief, and Mikey Tandino was his accomplice, and when they got caught, he took the fall. Now later on we do realise that Mikey Tandino has been involved with some really dangerous people, and it got me thinking, if he didn't take the fall for Axel Foley and spent some time in prison for his good friend, maybe his pathway would have went another direction. Maybe he would be a police detective. So he made this sacrifice for his good friend, and they established that earlier on. And honestly, it almost brought me to tears when he said, "And do you know why I did that? Do you know why I did that?" You're gonna laugh. Because I love you. That just got me. That got me right there, right? That's just obviously there to establish that Mikey Tandino is a guy worth avenging. It must have been quite a big achievement to have a man tell another man that he loved him in a mainstream action comedy that absolutely tore the box office to shreds. This scene also foreshadows the end of the film, where Billy Rosewood, played by Judge Reinhold, steps up to the plate to become a hero like Axel Foley, and he turns to say the same thing to him. The part that I find the most fascinating about this film is there is no character arc for Axel Foley. Axel Foley is our lead character for sure, but he does not change as the story progresses. It's only the Beverly Hills police force that changes. It's all about them. It's about them becoming more integrated. As you watch the beginning of the film, Axel Foley is already integrated, and so is Michael Tandino. These people don't treat anyone of any colour or class any differently than they would want to be treated themselves. Axel Foley rarely uses violence to solve his problems. He uses his wits, he uses his humour to one-up on people, and it is absolutely fascinating to watch. It's a total marvel of a performance that Eddie Murphy put out in this one. I love the way Axel Foley as a character is not small-minded, right? He's not closed-minded. He gets on with men and women of different races, different backgrounds, no matter who they are. And I tend to do that myself. When I meet someone from another country, I want to make them feel really welcome. You know, I want to get to know them. I'm intrigued by their homeland, I'm intrigued by their culture, and I get that from Axel Foley's character. Here's a guy who really wants to learn more about Beverly Hills. I know that you could argue, he's a bit of a dinosaur, Axel Foley, straight down the strip club. Well, I would just say each to their own, you know. I'm not here to judge. Personally, I would never be caught dead in a strip club. I just think you're a bit of a mug for going there. But hey, you want to go to a strip club and lose money? Be my guest. Besides the massive truck chase at the beginning in Detroit, this film does have very few action scenes, but never in a moment is it ever boring. And I don't know if I'll put that down. It's just how much charisma and how much of a screen presence Eddie Murphy has. It is absolutely captivating, along with Harold Faltermeyer. Harold Faltermeyer's amazing, iconic score. I miss those days we used to get those terrific soundtracks that would come out with the film. Stuff like the Lost Boys, Dirty Dancing, Top Gun. But the biggest standout for me is Beverly Hills Cop. The film just oozes 80s excellence. The themes that are running through this film are absolutely universal. I think what makes Axel Foley a hero is not that he carries a pistol, it's not that he fights people or anything like that, it's that he reaches out to people. He reaches out to people, he wants to make peace with people, and that is deeply heroic. You look at people like Charles Bronson or Clint Eastwood, did they do that in those films? No. All the action heroes that came before were never like Axel Foley. Axel Foley is a totally integrated man. He wants to make the world a better place, and even in the simple ways of just talking to someone, or, you know, trying to help someone out, getting to know someone. That, you know, Dirty Harry would have slaughtered 10 people, whereas Axel Foley would have wriggled his way out using his street smart wit. It's easy to forget what a juggernaut this film was. All you have to do is look on Wikipedia, right? 1984's Films of the Year, Beverly Hills Cop, it's right up the top, you can't beat it. It is an absolute monster. Up until he did Another 48 Hours, he had hit after hit. You know, I mean, I absolutely love The Golden Child, I love Coming to America, I even enjoy Harlem Nights as well. The guy was untouchable. He would just set the box office on fire, and to be a man of colour, to have that stature at that time, was absolutely remarkable, absolutely remarkable. There was no African American actor who could even come close to the amount of success that this man had. Even his live performance, Raw, was a box office blockbuster. When you look at the sort of black action heroes that came before Axel Foley, A lot of the ones that I enjoy, people like Shaft or Superfly or anything like that, they always have a sort of mistrust of white people, you know, for good reason, you know. As they said in The Jerk, God loves a working man, don't trust whitey. I just read Roger Ebert's review of this film from 1984, and in that review he couldn't make up his mind whether it was a comedy film or whether it was an action film. That really struck me, that Beverly Hills Cop was actually the blueprint for what was to come in this subgenre. You just have to take a look at some of the films that came after Beverly Hills Cop, in particular Fletch from 1986, which starred Chevy Chase, who also came from Saturday Night Live. Harold Faltermeyer also provided the score for that film, and the character has a very similar approach to detective work as Axel Foley does, using impersonation and comedy to get himself out of sticky situations. When you look at a film like 2001: A Space Odyssey, that film is absolutely a science fiction masterpiece, and Beverly Hills Cop is the original action comedy of the modern times. And that is primarily why I associate this film with being such a classic. It is not to be compared with films like The Godfather or Treasure of the Sierra Madre or Malcolm X or something like that. It can't compete with those films. It is not in the same genre. But in the subgenre of action comedy, this film cannot be matched. I've always been really fond of people who can do impersonations of, you know, famous celebrities and things like that. And Eddie Murphy in this film is one of those guys that really inspired me. From the dawn of time we came, moving silently down through the centuries, living many secret lives. No one knew we were among you until now. You cold-blooded bastard. I tell you what I think of it. I live to see you the contract, but I hope you leave enough room for my fist, because I'm going to ram it into your stomach and break your goddamn spine. As an action hero, there's never really been someone like Axel Foley. There's been a lot of pretenders, a lot of characters that are trying to be Axel Foley, and even Axel Foley himself can't be the real Axel Foley. You look at Beverly Hills Cop 2 and 3, that's not Axel Foley. Whereas Eddie Murphy, his performance as Axel Foley is truly heroic. He's out to avenge his friend who said that he loved him, and then he takes on the bad guys and he makes friends as he does it. He makes friends with people you wouldn't even imagine that he would be able to break bread with. That, to me, is true heroism. You feel as though you're with this chap. You're with this guy. He's giving you a knowing wink. With all of his little jokes and scams, you're with him every single step of the way. That's what a hero is. A hero is somebody that you can actually look up to. You know, all those bodybuilding posers, you know, with these massive egos, and you look at the history of some of these guys, they're not very nice people in real life. You know, didn't Stallone actually, like, divorce his wife by fax? Yeah, that's very heroic. When you look at a lot of those big roided up action heroes of the 1980s, yeah, those films are extremely entertaining, but they're not action heroes. A real action hero is a selfless character. I find a lot of these guys were they were just kind of unreachable. They weren't somebody that you could really identify with. They were not someone down to the audience's level, whereas Axel Foley brings him down to the audience's level. Here is a hero who wants to be friends with you. He wants to get to know you. He wants to try and help you. And you don't get that from Schwarzenegger and Stallone. You don't get that from Dolph Lundgren or Chuck Norris. They want you to perceive them as an unattainable Adonis. You may be wrong, there may be characters that came before, but never one so prominent. And after that, there was just dozens of them, dozens of imitators. Never once have they managed to get this lightning in a bottle ever again. If you don't agree with me that Beverly Hills Cop is the premier action comedy film, then leave me a wee comment and I will respond to you. If you like this video, give us a thumbs up. If you don't like this video, give us a big old thumbs down. And if you want to subscribe to the channel, please hit the subscribe button. And if you want some updates, ring the bell and you'll be first to know when I've got a new video up. In the meantime, keep sending me some recommendations and I will happily review them for you. And also, thank you for listening to this lunatic once again. Have a lovely day, and have a lovely evening, and have a lovely morning if you're in that part of the world right now. Really lovely chatting with you. Peace, love, rock and roll.